30-minute talk, but I'll probably elaborate more in certain points than I have in other times that I've given it. And feel free to ask questions at any point, and we'll definitely leave time for questions at the end, and I'll keep it recorded so that I'll repeat the question, and I'm happy to keep that on if there's any gaps in the talk that you want to learn about or ask about. So this is called SimplyTest.me. It's a community case study, and we'll learn a lot more about exactly what this is in a moment. I go by Nerdstein. This is a live action shot of me right here. And I work for a company called Hook 42. I'm the Vice President of Engineering there. And the great thing, honestly, about working at Hook 42 is they're very generous and kind about letting me attend events like this, which is great. You know, I love being a part of the community and being here. So they've thankfully allowed me to be here and helped offset some of the cost and everything like that. And let me see, we're going to skip ahead. So here's a brief outline of the talk. We're going to look and reflect a bit on the motivations of SimplyTest.me, what it is, why it exists, how it works. We'll look into some of the technical architecture. I don't particularly consider this a technical talk, though, but I know some people are super interested in that, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to look into a little bit of a roadmap and a vision of kind of where things are going with the project and how this is going to evolve with time. And then I'd be happy to take questions after and even during. So feel free. This is a small room, and you know, I want to make sure that you all get something out of this. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some project motivations. The main focus of this is how and why did this system come to exist? What does it try to do in the world? It's probably going to be a little bit of like a history lesson combined with some, you know, kind of facts and things that led to where we are today. All right, who's ever seen this image before? Several people, yeah, okay. So yeah, this is kind of one of those classic Drupal images, and you know, it's not really been updated, quite frankly, you know, in modern times, right? Like you see here, we've got ModX and Joomla, and you know, and this graphic was created probably back when those were like really, really, really relevant, you know, in the day. And I'm not saying they're less relevant now. I mean, Joomla's definitely still around and it's kicking, you know. But, you know, I do feel that it's a tad bit dated. But sadly, you know, even though this image is years and years and years old, this statement it's making about Drupal it kind of remains true today, doesn't it? Right? I mean, if you're trying to like learn how to use Drupal, it does kind of feel a bit like that, right? There's a lot going on, and it's definitely complex, and that's not great, right? But my hope really is that this image is not evergreen, even though this was probably made 8 years ago now, or 6 years ago, and here we are 6 years later, right? But I hope it doesn't stay this way. I think that's the point. You know, it should be of no surprise to anybody that's here that, you know, Drupal is hard. And it kind of makes sense, right? It's super powerful. It's really extensible. It's a flexible system. It can do a lot of different things. It can do a lot of things well in the space. You know, and let's like dig a little deeper into that, right? So in any given day, if someone is working with Drupal, if they're developing or using Drupal, you know, they may encounter any of the following things: PHP, Drush, Composer, CSS, JavaScript, HTML, Twig, testing frameworks, and guess what? That's not the end of the list, right? So you have to really, really, really know a lot of things to be effective, right? And it's hard. It's really hard. And even if you know those technologies, even if you feel like you're an expert in certain areas, if you're a front-end developer or a back-end developer, Drupal, of course, then puts its own conventions on top of that because it has its own set of best practices that can and should be observed because, you know, that's how it's sustained, and that's just a natural part of developing in a framework or a system, right? It has its own conventions. So it leads us back to our general point. Starting Drupal is a very daunting thing to do, right? So where do people go to start exploring basic Drupal concepts. Where do they even begin? SimplyTest.me. SimplyTest.me is both an open source project and a service that I have now maintained for about a year. It was created and maintained originally by Patrick D. on Drupal.org, and the first commits were registered in 2012. So this system has been around for many versions of Drupal now. And I consider it to be a vital service for the community, especially for new people and beginners that are new. But the primary focus, the primary objective of the system is to lower the barrier of entry for new users to the system, right? And I'm here to share a bit today about what I've learned and my future for this moving forward, which is kind of changing a lot. But in its simplest form, SimplyTest.me is nothing more than a front-end web form that a user can specify one or more things that they want to try out in Drupal. Those could be modules or different versions of things. They could try out patches. And all SimplyTest does is basically spin up a brand new Drupal site with all of that information and all of the things that they've selected, completely configured the way that it installs it, loads it, and you get a fresh, brand new Drupal site. Right? Instances that are spawned, they remain up for about 12 hours and they're automatically torn down, so they don't stay, they don't stick around. And this process is completely automated for people. The only thing they need to do is specify what they want. The code itself to run SimplyTest all lives 100% on Drupal.org. It houses all of the code. We can accept community contributions today. But it's also a service that runs this application in a free and open manner. There is no money exchanged. We'll talk more about all of this. But everything about it is free for the end user. They don't have to pay a cent. They could use it unlimited. This service has been spanning every major version of Drupal since Drupal 5. Right? I see code from Drupal 5 in the code base that I'm still maintaining. It has received ongoing updates and enhancements for every single major version of Drupal since then. So you can imagine going from something like 7 to 8 about how much code needed to be rewritten and developed and altered to support all the new workflows that exist for 8. It's a lot of work. So let me reiterate something. Its entire sole purpose is to help people use Drupal and to lower the barrier of entry for community members. That's all it does. The project is a labor of love. Contributors like me, we do so only for goodwill. The community is stronger by having a tool like this, and it's stronger when we support everyone in the community and not just those that are contributing in code, right? We want to make sure we're supporting everybody. So we provide this tool to help people learn about Drupal, and we want to introduce them or allow them to be introduced to all the Drupal concepts, like what is core and what is contrib, how do you use modules, how do you install themes, how do you run distributions. And these are all pretty critical things that a lot of people take for granted if you've been in the community for a while. But usability is the focus. Usability is the key of this system. It's the reason why it's its primary goal. So the primary desire of this is to make sure that the tool provides an abstraction for managing all of the complexities that Drupal introduces, especially around installing themes and modules and distributions, installing Drupal itself, and setting up the underlying infrastructure, right? Which could be a database and a Apache web server, Nginx, right? All of that stuff completely automated in PHP configuration. We want this to be as easy and painless as possible to make sure that Drupal can just get into people's hands and be used seamlessly. Contribution is another primary motivation of SimplyTest.me. Users can really easily test out a module to see if it meets their needs. And that can be extremely helpful in trying things out and poking around and exploring technology before you roll it into your site. The configuration can be exported, especially, if you install features in 7 or if you go through the admin UI and download configuration. So people have been able to do stuff with, actual exports of stuff from SimplyTest Me. And one of the most popular things that people use SimplyTest Me for is testing patches. So if you have a patch that's been uploaded to Drupal.org and it's been, people need to review those patches and make sure that they work. SimplyTest Me offers a workflow for doing that. You specify the project that is being patched. You supply the URL to the patch itself. You click one button and it has that patch running on a Drupal site. So that can be a really great way to RTBC issues. And again, all of this is done in a fairly automated manner for users. There's really not a whole lot of manual stuff that needs to happen. Back in 2012, when the system was created, this was long really before the DevOps movement even, right? Like people were just barely starting to get into this. Our community had the first release of Drush in 2007, which was about 5 years before 2012, right? But Drush really was only kind of adopted or really accessible for power users, like people that really understood what it was to be used for, and really deeply understood the operations of a Drupal site, right? But today's application uses so many different technologies now that span different systems and server and even Drupal itself, right? And all of this that we've set up and built is completely automated. So all the stuff around Composer and the dependencies and all of that, it's done. So as the project lead, my role is to make sure that the project itself remains vibrant, that the service remains free, and it's well supported into the future. That's my goal. It's my responsibility. And it's not run by one company. It has no corporate interests at hand, and it's not biased in any respect. It's really intended to be led by the community, driven by the community, and grassroots as much as possible. And so this service will remain free and open as long as I am the lead of the project, 100%. And lastly, we always try to look at the bigger picture. So anytime that we are evaluating change or we're looking into how SimplyTest can have a bigger footprint or impact in the world, we start by looking at open source projects. And if at all possible, we give back to other projects and help make them stronger as part of our efforts and a greater sustainable responsibility perspective. These motivations not only help understand the past of the project, but they also serve as key factors for how we're going to move forward. Any questions so far? Everything make sense? Okay. Currently, SimplyTest has 2 legacy infrastructure sponsors. We have Druid and Maloon, and those right now, both of those sponsors are paying for the serving infrastructure right now for the production instances. This year, we welcomed Linode right out of Philadelphia, awesome, by the way, who has thrown some money at the infrastructure. And right now, we are using them or allowing people to contribute and have development instances that are running SimplyTest to make patches and contribute to give back to the project. And Linode is running that entire infrastructure right now. So it's been really great, and it's been a super huge help to have that infrastructure in place. I appreciate that Druid and Maloon especially, have been around this long, paying for the servers that we're using and supporting the system. I really want to thank them, especially in the recording. I hope this gets back to them. But it's a great way to just help run a service, right, and have these people support us. It's been very nice. And they've been doing it for years. And it's because of these people, these individuals, and these companies that this service remains entirely free. There's no money exchange. They outright pay for the servers, and there's no need to really raise funds specifically for the infrastructure part of it. So again, I want to thank them for their generosity and their longstanding support of the system. It's really great. All right. So moving into the next realm of this talk, we're going to look a bit at the technical architecture. So we shared what the motivations are, we shared where this has come from, and let's talk a bit about where it is today. And this is really going to be focused on the current system, but this is also a great segue into why the future looks the way that it's going to look. All right, so the following diagram on here shows a kind of a conceptual mapping of the different systems and the flow that users go through. And I think I'm glad it is pretty big on this screen. So first, the user goes and they hit up a web server for SimplyTest.me. Okay, that pulls up a web page, and that's where the form is loaded and everything like that. And SimplyTest.me pulls information from Drupal.org. It pulls metadata. So like, what version of core do you want? What version of the project? What are the projects, right? It loads all of that information from Drupal.org, periodically, like every maybe hour or so, it refreshes certain pieces of information. So there's very little lag about, oh, this version isn't showing up on this project or something like that, right? If you cut a release within about an hour and a half, you'll have it available on SimplyTest. And that's completely automated. Then what happens is someone presses a button and says, okay, I've specified what I wanted, boom, submit. Where do we go? So the SimplyTest.me web server goes and generates a lot of metadata about what you want and the configuration that has been specified. And that goes back to what we call these worker servers. And these worker servers are where all of the instances live on the project. And it is load balanced, so the minute that it is submitted, it is split across whatever set of infrastructure that we have that is running the instances. And right now we actually only have one, so it's not a great model. But conceptually it can support more than one if the sponsors were there to do so. Once the worker servers say, okay, I have this information, I'm going to run all of my automated scripts, and I'm going to build you a Drupal site with the information you requested, it's going to kick it back to SimplyTest.me and say, hey, I'm ready to go. And SimplyTest.me will redirect the user to the brand new instance with a unique URL that is completely available for them to use at their own discretion. Okay? So this is a little bit about how this works. In terms of the conceptual diagram and the systems interacting with each other. And also just bear in mind that the worker servers are automatically set to kind of expire instances after 12 hours. So like it's not up permanently. So that's why this is able to kind of cycle itself and stay maintained. If those instances ran indefinitely, the resources would be completely clobbered on the server. Cool. All right. SimplyTest uses many different tools and community projects to help make this happen. First, as I already noted, it's pulling a lot of metadata and code repositories in patches from Drupal.org itself. And that is really allowing for the users to specify exactly what they want and have that information be as up-to-date as possible whenever they're doing so. The projects themselves are managed both with Drush and Composer, and Drush is also used to do a lot of automation behind the scenes with like installing the site and clearing the cache when it's relevant and setting host names and stuff like that. So we do a lot of configuration and installation stuff with Drush that users don't even need to pay attention to. And then behind the scenes, like these worker servers, like how are they set up, right? Well, it's really just a giant LAMP server, a really, really big, high memory, high storage LAMP server. And we basically spin up new virtual hosts. We specify the versions of PHP that we want per site because it's different from 7 to 8 and 6 and everything like that. And they're all on there. They're all running concurrently on one giant server today. And all of that stuff is really configured based on the major version of Drupal that is running. Okay? Yeah, I think you're starting to see some things moving forward here. Next phase of the technical overview. So we've got a lot of really cool things happening too about the dynamic host generation and stuff like that. So when you get a brand new virtual host, you need a unique host name to get it. So we're using HA proxy to both terminate the SSL certificate for a wildcard cert for all subdomains under a certain domain for SimplyTest, and we're using it to generate and balance out to the correct virtual host that is running Apache behind the scenes. And that is all running through HA proxy. For security certificates, we're using Let's Encrypt, and that gets generated periodically both for the front-end web server and for the back-end. I recently replaced the back-end one just due to some challenges around Let's Encrypt and their DNS management. We paid for a wildcard certificate so that it's just easier. One really, really cool thing that has been fun to play with. Who's familiar with LXC? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, so who's familiar with Docker? Okay, so LXC is the precursor of Docker, and that is what these systems are running on. Now, I did say to you that we're running like a LAMP stack, right? But both of the servers that are running are using containers to run the proxy, the web server, and the LAMP stack. And the use of containers is actually great because in terms of the server management, we can take snapshots of any of those servers and export them and load them somewhere else. So whenever we want to run a development server, the easiest thing for us to do is to use LXC to do that, and we snapshot all of the different containers that are running and port them over into another environment. It's super easy, and it's really good for backups. So if I ever need to restore from a backup, like if someone tries to hack SimplyTest me, I have backups of that running periodically that I can very easily restore, and it's all using this kind of precursor to Docker, right? It's pretty neat. So that's the benefit of using it. We're also making use of SSH between these servers, so we have a lot of keys and a lot of account management that happen that are pretty hard-coded based on the infrastructure. And guess what? Fancy old bash scripts. It never goes away, right? Like everyone, loves to talk about Fabric and all these other, Ansible and all this automated technology. Nope, this thing is using plain old bash scripts because we love it, right?
Bash is phenomenal.
Yes.
I love Bash.
Me too. But I know a lot of people, and there's a lot of benefits of using cooler technology. Yeah. But guess what? It's not happening here. All right. So we've tried to cover, really a high-level overview of how these systems are working, how they're interacting with each other, the technology that's going on under the hood. No questions about that so far? All right. I'd like to now kind of shift gears and talk a little bit more about my personal thoughts on some of this, especially with respect to the current state of the service. This image kind of reflects my view of where the system is today, especially from the perspective of the technical debt that is kind of acquired from running versions of Drupal since version 5, and all the scripts and all the patches that have had to be maintained and run and executed. It looks like that, So currently, it isn't running 5. It's actually only running 6, 7, and 8, and it supports most distributions, not really Drupal 8, because Drupal 8 distributions are doing some really unique things. So it's really hard to support that. But the system really has always been this kind of set of incremental changes based on what's been learned. And we try really hard to maintain the same experience across all of the different technological changes that we've incurred as a community over the years. But it's just been really hard. And the result of it really is a pretty complex and fragile architecture that it just makes it really, really difficult to sort of maintain. A lot of things are hard-coded. I mean, a lot of things. So if you look at kind of the result of that, even the smallest of changes that, they've been even prepped for weeks and tested on non-development servers and everything like that, they still have some edge cases that break things, right? And it can aggravate users, and I get nasty emails and issue queue people that, are like, why, your system does not work, right? And that's okay. That's what happens in this world. But these systems are extremely finely tuned. They're very configured. And right now, it's super bespoke, right? This is a very, very, very nuanced system today. So as such, we have accrued a good amount of technical debt, and it's very difficult to keep up with, especially being the lead of the project. It's even harder to make any change, and I look forward to having a future state that is a lot more simple than this. So what's the overall gut check? Even with these difficulties that we talked about, the service is still running. The lights are on. It's not doing too badly, right? It's actually pretty stable. And it really only requires a pretty reasonable amount of maintenance, upgrading Drush versions and doing things like that, checking on the storage periodically, looking at the logs and making sure nothing's going too sideways. And the system runs most of the time. I mean, pretty much all the time, right? It does have some known issues and limitations that I really wish we could resolve. I would love it, but it's just really hard. But honestly, I've gotten to a point where I spend most of my time thinking of and moving us towards the future version of this system. I want to be prioritizing that because I actually see that having a much stronger and better impact on the community than trying to go back and make sure that some Drupal 6 distribution is running thoughtfully on this infrastructure, right? It's both amazing and surprising that this system has had so much longevity. I feel like it's been around now for a long time. I mean, I'm shocked, and I think it speaks volumes about what we're trying to do. And I do want to thank Greg Boggs and Elijah Lynn, who have been really helping me to maintain the services and the infrastructure today. They've both been amazing to work with, and then they're volunteering their time 100%. So I appreciate that. All right, so you know where I'm at right now. Let's talk about where we're going. I want to describe a few key things. There's sort of a lot going on. So you'll hear some new ideas and things that I plan to explore in the future, but some of it might be subject to change. All right, so there's a famous African proverb right now. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Who's heard that? Pretty common, right? Especially for community work. So there's a massive disconnect today. SimplyTest is helping especially new Drupal users and even users of the system, Drupal to test patches and things. It's helping them to get familiar with using Drupal itself. And it helps build knowledge, right? It actually helps people learn and grow and establish themselves through using the system. But no one, very, 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 very few people contribute to this project itself. And something seems really off to me about that, right? So the first thing that we're looking to do to help that is we're going to upgrade the front end for SimplyTest to Drupal 8. We're going to do that, and we're in progress. There's many inherent benefits of doing this. There's an improved entity system for us to make use of. There's improved support for web services that we can use more standard ways of communicating between servers and things, right? There's simplified development and object orientation that people are now learning about in our community and using today in a much more modern architecture. And there's new features that are rolled into every minor version of Drupal, right? Drupal 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, all of this stuff. So this really can unlock a whole world of opportunities that SimplyTest could probably take advantage of and reduce the amount of customization that we need to build into Drupal site, right? So we really want to start fresh and get it right and kind of start with a clean slate and use the right platform to do it. If we truly desire to give something people that they want to learn and benefit from, then we do need this to be on Drupal 8. That's where our community is going, and Drupal 9 for the record, right? It's these modern conventions that are great, and the use of Composer opens up an entire ecosystem of potential tools that we can leverage now and into the future. Just makes sense. The current web UI will be rewritten in Drupal 8, and this is likely not going to touch or affect the sandbox servers because they're separate systems, right? We can actually completely just change the front end and not touch the back end part of it as part of this activity. So we'll still continue to use things like SSH and bash scripts as we deem appropriate. And we'll make a brand new version of the project on Drupal.org. It's already there. It's an 8. Version. And we're going to rebuild that distribution from the ground up with a fresh architecture. We desire to remain feature parity. We're not going to lose features at all from what's there currently. But there's definitely a discussion about how to best leverage and sort of deprecate certain features of SimplyTest that either aren't being used or are not, could be refactored in a more ideal way for Drupal 8. That's probably the right way to phrase it. So feedback would be welcome, and I need to do a better job of getting some of these things into the issue queue for open discussion. We created, as part of the goal of SimplyTest, is really helping people to use Drupal. I want the experience to get a facelift too. I want there to be a more straightforward and easier way to actually use SimplyTest Me, right? It's been a long time since it's been revisited, a very long time. So I had some ideas and generated and had paid a designer to help me come up with a new wireframe of how to use SimplyTest Me in a new re-envisioned perspective. And you could see a lot of the annotations there of like, kind of behaviors and expected interactions that happen on the site. And one of the great things about it is that I think this can, really push us into a new and even more powerful experience with SimplyTest that is even more usable than what it is right now. So I'm really excited about this. One really great thing about this too is we're still working on this. So like this screenshot actually is kind of a little old and dated. We're probably going to even make more edits to this before we really finalize on some of this. But it's a delicate experience, right? We want to make sure that it's simple and straightforward to use. So getting this right is really important for the experience. But once we have a prototype in place, we're definitely going to have people test it out and see what they think, right? So I would, strongly encourage people to use it when that time comes to propose, to work on the new experience. With the same designer that I'm working with, we created a brand new design and a new logo for SimplyTest. So we're going to completely facelift the system and make it look nice and fresh and rebranded with something that is, I think, a lot more modern looking and fresh. Right now it definitely has kind of the feel of like a late 90s, early 2000s website, right? And we're going to go and completely gut this and do a brand new design, give it a good facelift, have a much more professional presentation to it. So we welcome feedback on this. This is not reflective of the new wireframes, for the record. This is just kind of a design comp that was made from the current part of the system. I also want to thank Iris Ibekwe from Civic Actions, former coworker of mine. She's actually helping to build all of the theming elements in Drupal 8 right now for this front end, brand new front end, that will be launched the minute that we get the new site up. So I want to thank her for doing that. It's been really great, and she's awesome. And with the help of both the designer and Iris, I expect these to have this change to be significant for people to use the system and really feel good about it. These are really, really key contributions. And I do have stickers. I printed some stickers for the new logo. So if you want stickers, I'm your guy. All right. Here's some big news. The current system runs on a giant LAMP stack, right? It's spinning up virtual hosts. It's making databases. It's managing multiple versions of PHP. It's destroying those things automatically. It's shutting them down. It's doing all of that. From the time when the system was created until now, our community has done so much with, expanding our horizons into container technologies and Docker. So, folks are probably familiar with Lando and DDev and Doxel and all of these things. And they are helping, with a high amount of automation to lower the barrier for using Docker either on your system or elsewhere, right? And container-based technology is perfect for SimplyTest, right? You have all these little instances that are sitting around that are spun up. They can easily be destroyed. They can run on their own completely separate architecture and infrastructure, right? It's perfect. So instead of having a fragile monolith of a LAMP infrastructure, what about something like that? Seems a lot easier to maintain, right? I think so. So about a month ago or 2 months ago, I announced a partnership to replace the LAMP stack completely in the complete backend of SimplyTest with Tugboat QA. Tugboat QA is a container-based service that's run by Lullabot. And this is all infrastructure as code. We generate a bunch of YAML files to run and configure Drupal sites the way that we want them using standard Docker images. We run a set of commands, just like Bash, right, to go and configure these Tugboat instances the way that we want them, and it spins up a Drupal site. It's gorgeous. And the Tugboat APIs automatically have settings and configuration to allow us to destroy them after 12 hours automatically. There's no extra scripts needed. They're 100% configurable, so we have full discretion over it now and in the future. It is a great fit. The best part about it, quite frankly, is Lullabot has offered to pay for this infrastructure 100% for the community. Pretty cool, right?
So does that mean Druid and Maloon won't
Yep.
have to anymore?
No, we will make use of their servers elsewhere. They'll still run the front end for SimplyTest, and we will recommission those servers either to load balance the front end or possibly use it as, maybe development infrastructure, right? We're still working through that, but that's a great question. But no, they will definitely be sticking around, and I'm still very grateful for them sponsoring it. This is just taking us in an even different direction now. So Lullabot will become project sponsors, and they are offering this platform free of charge for us, and is not bound, by any tool or any company today. So we can do whatever we need to do with it. They have given us carte blanche, and they're very, very easy to work with. And they are committed to making sure that SimplyTest stays as a community-based tool. There have been some concerns that have been raised about us using a platform to do this, that is not open source. But quite frankly, it's making use of many open source technologies under the hood. And it simplifies all of this system and makes it significantly more stable. So I can't understate that enough. So I thank Lullabot for their generosity, and we are in the process of converting the current Drupal 7 SimplyTest system to use this container backend right now. It is almost done. And it'll be released. Pretty cool, right? The next thing is Google Summer of Code. We submitted a Google Summer of Code project. We identified 3 people that would help move the Drupal 8 system forward as mentors with myself. So Elijah Cameron Egan's and Ryan Bateman, who is a coworker of mine who does a lot with React. And we're going to take that wireframe that we did and the new designs that we have in the Drupal 8 system, and we're going to build a brand new React front end on top of it. Pull all of the stuff on the fly. It's going to be really cool. And they're going to help move the Drupal 8 system forward, right? We're going to finish the feature development of that, get it ready to go. It's going to be implementing the brand new design, and we'll have to do some work to get the Tugboat stuff integrated when that time comes too, right? So it's going to be a fun project for whoever, one or more students that might want to work on this, right? If I had the opportunity to do something like this in college, I'd be thrilled, So it's pretty neat. All right, let's talk about something else. Quite frankly, I think it's pretty amazing what we've been able to do without any money involved at all, right? Everything that you're talking about, there's no money. None. And I've been grateful and quite frankly, I think lucky that we have the sponsors that we have that have just been so diligent about paying the bills behind the scenes. And the rest of the magic happens 100% through open source contributions and free labor, right? But only having a server sponsorship is, it can be kind of expensive, right? The servers that are running it are easily couple $100 a month to run, these systems. And that's not for everybody, right? Those costs add up, especially after the years, right? And right now I've also been paying out of pocket for some of these initiatives and some of the servers and stuff that we need so we can have the proper infrastructure to do things. But again, so far there's no money involved, but there really should be. So we set up an open collective for SimplyTest, and this allows us to collect donations from anybody in the community, companies, people, individuals, as much as they want to contribute back to the system. My goal is that we can collect smaller donations that end up adding into bigger things and can help offset any expenses that we run into. But we also are really starting to now look at initiatives for SimplyTest, right? So what we're looking to do is to offer packages to camps that use SimplyTest as part of their contribution days to generate some funds, because maybe what we can do is come up with some issues that people can work on and give instructions for how to use SimplyTest, and in return that there would be like $50 or $100 back to the project. So that's one really kind of easy way to do that I think there's a good fit, especially for sprints. But one other, we'll talk about this in the next slide, but there's definitely a lot of other opportunities here too. I want to be clear though that we've been very lucky that we haven't incurred a lot of expense to date in terms of what the systems need to do, that things are being paid for, right? But I think we're lucky, right? So this is going to give us kind of some leeway if we have to do something, if we have to pay for a server, if we need more infrastructure, if we have to pay for certificates or anything like that. But also, I really see an opportunity, and I talked about this in my previous talk. I don't think any of you were there, but about inclusion. Like, inclusion is a really major goal of both SimplyTest and I think important for the community. And I announced about 6 months ago that we are going to be raising funds towards an inclusion program for SimplyTest. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay for books, we're going to purchase materials, we're going to partner with training vendors to get a very low-cost experience, and it's going to be like an internship of sorts that are going to allow people, brand new contributors, people that want to learn code, underrepresented people in communities that could really use a hand and some help, and get them involved in the community and have them work directly on SimplyTest in a paid capacity. So we're going to give them some money and let them learn. I feel like that's a great way to expand our community. So if we ever want to hit that goal, because it costs a lot of money, we need more sponsors now, right? And one other offering besides camps, which we mentioned, and I know you're very heavily involved in GovCon and stuff, so I might be speaking to the right audience here, just a bit, just a wee bit. We also are looking to offer what's called a demo framework, right? How many people have heard of one-click instances? Do you know what that is? Someone clicks a button and they get here's a brand new Shopify website. Here's a boom, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to get a new this thing, right? We're going to offer that for demo frameworks. We're going to offer that for Lightning. We're going to offer that for, Thunder, all these distributions. But Ryan Srama from Centauro, which is formerly Commerce Guys, they are the first to purchase and donate money back to SimplyTest to launch their commerce demo on SimplyTest with a one-click button. And it's almost done, and it's going to be rolled out with the tugboat work once that finishes up.
When I know you said almost done, like we're talking about summertime?
Week.
Damn.
Yeah. I'm waiting for one thing to finish right now. And I'm going to stand up a beta site that can be testable. We're going to make sure that all the kinks are worked out of it, right? This has been in the works for a while. Yeah. So I think there's a significant opportunity to raise funds around these one-click demos. We're going to do it for Umami free. I'm going to build Umami right into SimplyTest.me for test a Drupal demo, and it's going to boom spin up Umami right on the spot. And there's a very natural fit for Tugboat in this respect as well, because they offer something called base previews that allow these things to be cached. So the minute that I click a button, I can spin it up within 3 or 5 seconds of having an entire Drupal infrastructure done. So I'm really, really proud to announce that Centauro and Ryan's team were gracious enough to help move this initiative forward and make a donation back to SimplyTest as part of it. And it's been really nice to work with them, and they're great people. So. And lastly, we did talk a little bit about this, but I'll just rehash just a bit. The main goal with all of this is really around an inclusion program, because honestly, that's really what the money should be going towards. It should be going right back into the community, because that's what the tool is doing, right? So we need to think a little bit bigger about this and try to generate some new contributors back into the system. And I think it's a really critical way of both keeping the service running and staying alive. Also, helping make future leaders in our community, right? Future contributors. So I think it has the potential to be, really impactful. It's going to go really well with our open collective donations that we're using. And it's going to be all inclusive. We're going to look to pay people to do this work. We're going to give them machines to use. We're going to pay for books. We're going to get them into a training program to give them the support they need. I think it's going to be awesome. And, we'll do whatever we can to try to, make this work. I'll probably look to partner with existing programs that are doing some similar things, Girls Who Code, some other larger city initiatives that I think are a very natural fit to help with some of the recruiting that we might need to get, make this work. And really the end goal, I think, with it too, is I want to make sure that people are capable of getting jobs after they do this work. So I'm going to be working very hard to help with job placement. I'm going to work with some of my network of people and customers and, and people that I know and other people that I network with to see if we can open up entry-level opportunities for people to do this work in real life. Yep. All right, so that's really about all. Happy to take any questions, but I want to thank you all for sitting in the talk, and I hope this was useful. Thanks. Questions?
Could you do a little demo of SimplyTest?
Sure.
You said it doesn't work with Drupal 8?
Oh boy. Give me 1 second. Oh, I'm not on the internet. That would help. Give me 1 second, please. I've been having a hard time getting on the Wi-Fi.
God, yes.
We could all disconnect. Maybe you could get on.
It's okay, I don't need to. It's good to disconnect sometimes.
Were you here last year?
Yes, I was.
For whatever it's worth, I just had to forget last year's credentials, and then I was able to enter the new one. It wasn't giving me this credential is wrong. It was just kind of silently failing.
Okay, I might have to try that one. Maybe when I'm not standing in front of a bunch of people. So I'm really clunky with technology these days. I'm like losing my.
If only there was some sort of training program.
Yeah, right? Boy, you should see me use my cell phone too. Yikes.
I had to create my own hotspot too, because it didn't work for me, even when I tried to forget it.
Okay, there's my mouse. Okay, so here's SimplyTest, and I think the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like the easiest test or the most straightforward is actually testing Drupal. So if I come in and I type Drupal,
You have an A.
Did I also mention that I can't type?
Can you add one module too? Any module?
Yep. So you can do that up here, but you could see, just to exemplify my point, that you could test a release or you could test any branch of Drupal that you want down here, right? So like the branches are really good for patches. So you pick a branch if you want to test a patch, and we're looking to improve that experience a little bit. If I want to add another project, I could test a project right here too. So I could type in password policy or, taxonomy menu. But I'll do that down here, and you can add as many as you want. You can add, literally anything. So we're going to do 8.71. We're going to come in, and let's say I want to run password policy. It's my module that needs to be maintained better. Let's say I want to add taxonomy menu. That's another one of my modules that needs to be maintained better. There we go. Okay. If I want to test patches, I just paste the URLs in here. If I want to test the installation of Drupal, I can click bypass and I can run through the manual installer. Otherwise, it'll install it automatically. So I'm just going to have it install. And I click launch. And it goes through this installation script. Drupal 8 does take a little bit longer because Composer, running Composer and things can be a bit of a beast. But you'll see this running here. It's about 50% done. So it should be just a few seconds. I
Oh, sweet.
That's what I get every time I try it.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to take a look. But as I said, it can be a labor of love. So, but yeah, sometimes we do get, especially like the Drupal.org infrastructure sometimes blocks a lot of things too, because they're working on a lot of new web application firewall rules and things like that. And sometimes the SimplyTest IPs get rejected. But yeah.
Ones work though.
The 7's really easy.
Yeah.
Yep, all the drush stuff just like kind of makes it fly.
That's actually how I learned Drupal 7 is using this.
Nice. Oh, awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Any other questions?
I
Comments?
didn't notice you submitting anything for GovCon yet. Just saying.
I might need to
Just
do that.
seeing how this would be an awesome site building class to get people to learn
It would be awesome.
Blade 7.
Especially for Gov, since
Yeah.
you can't even run Composer on government apps.
I think Amy June does actually cover this a lot in her first time Drupal contribution workshop. So I certainly wouldn't want to step on her toes.
She hasn't submitted anything.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to have a talk.
Definitely you're not stepping on her toes.
Yes, indeed. But in best case, we don't get error messages like that. All right. Questions? Comments?
I dig the late 90s look.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I didn't do it, so it's a yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's a functional thing. I could care less what it looks like, as long as it conforms.
Yeah, well, it is due for
Looks
a
good.
good
That
facelift.
site
You haven't seen my
overhaul.
stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you. Appreciate it.
So yeah.